In the year 3972 AD, in a place called the Forest of Death, a guy named Ashariot gets his eyes cut out by another mate named Glenn. Apparently, Ashariot is the strongest swordsman in the Empire. They're all here to stop a land named Wishtek from invading the borders of their empire. The Empire had given holy spears to 14 heroes and sent them on a mission. In the present, Ashariot incredulously asks his friends why they would attack him this way when they're allies against a common enemy. However, the 7 other heroes, who are attacking the rest, don't give a fudge about team spirit and all that. They praise Ashariot for being able to pull off this ridiculous mission with just the other 3, but they plan to eliminate all 4 of them and claim the honor for themselves. Soon after, they take him out. 20 years later, in the year 3992 AD, in a place called Real de Vellum, a carriage conveys a young girl inside of it. She hopes to be at the port soon and reach the other side, where she can find the peaceful land of the 7 heroes. Shortly after, a chief warrior monk conducts the execution of some stowaways who had tried to sneak in through the border by hiding in vehicles. As they plead for their death, the Rasheb says it's regrettable that they have to do this, but he has a huge smile on his face. He reminds them to obtain travel passes if their monastery approves it, and tells them to be patient, but a man secretly watches him from nearby. When Rasheb steps out, he finds one of his men holding down the young girl from before, who was caught hiding among a merchant's shipment. She pleads that she wasn't hiding, but Rasheb asks the man to bring her in for the final execution. Suddenly, a young guy that looks like an elf refers to the girl as Peepee and takes her away, claiming he's her brother. However, the warrior monks don't believe that they're siblings and prepare to execute them. When the elf realizes they won't listen, he decides to use his sword. However, before he can, the guy who was watching the execution from before picks up the 2 kids like they're his siblings. When the chief monk demands to know who he is, the new guy offers the chief some gold coins, so he changes his mind. The chief claims the kids seem virtuous, but all he wants is that bread. Later that evening, the little girl thanks them for saving her life. However, the young elf pounds her head for ruining his own plans to stow away, but she argues with him about giving her the name Peepee. Eventually, the adult tells them they won't make it through with their half-baked plans. He tells them that he's given a bunch of cash to a smuggler, and he's working for days to help them escape. Apparently, he doesn't care if they're caught and executed, but he believes it will be pointless if their capture causes him a problem. The man refers to the young guy as Little Hero, who wants to make a name for himself like the 7 heroes, but the young elf says that name makes him want to vomit. When he leaves them, they plead with him to tell them about his plans with the smuggler. The man hesitates and asks if they have a strong enough reason to want to cross to the other side, so the girl confesses that she doesn't know where to go because she has no one left. While they're talking, the young elf detects that 13 men are coming nearby, which surprises the other man. The elf throws the girl into the nearby river and asks the man to prepare his weapon. Soon after, 13 monk warriors show up, and the man realizes the young guy has good ears. The warrior monks say their chief released them because they showed great virtue at the port earlier, so they explain that they're going to evaluate their virtues personally. That's just fancy talk for bribery, which is how much you donate to the monastery. The leader of the gang tells his warriors to eliminate both guys and take their stuff. One guy that thinks he's quick on his feet leaps in to slice them, but our elf slices him in a split second. The other man watches incredulously. Although he suspects he's someone great he's heard of, he doesn't believe someone so strong would let him sneak up to him when he did earlier. The leader of the monk gang calls the elf a scoundrel for attacking a monk. Right, especially when they obviously came in peace. The other monks ambush the young guy, but he slices them in half like bread. Soon after, the kid throws all their corpses underwater so they can swim with the fishes. Looking at him as if he had seen a ghost, the man asks the boy who he is and asks him to come with him on their journey. Soon after, the elf girl comes out of the water and berates our guy for throwing her into the water. The man introduces himself to the kids as Weed, and the elf guy says he's called Coinzel. The girl tries to say her real name, but Coinzel tells her that her name is Peepee and tells her to stop yapping. Later on, they head to an underground tavern owned by the smugglers. While Coinzel enjoys some beer, Peepee laments about how weird the place is. Meanwhile, a lady named Altea with an exposed butt crack who's speaking with Weed admires how cute the kids are. She thanks him for paying so much of an advance, higher than what the market is offering. Downstairs, Coinzel keeps downing bottles of beer and even surprises an old man sitting nearby. Weed finally tells Altea he's looking for a discount, and that annoys her because of how tight security has been, so Weed apologizes and explains he used some cash to save the kids. Eventually, Altea, the leader of the smugglers, agrees because she has a soft spot for strong youngsters. Shortly after, Weed prepares to introduce Coinzel to Altea and tells him not to lose his composure no matter what she says. When Weed eventually finds Peepee, he finds her in exposing clothing, and it turns out one of the tavern ladies had given her clothing that inspires dirty thoughts because her clothes were dirty. While alone, Altea realizes Coinzel is considering crossing over on his own. Eventually, she tells him he can meet the 7 heroes if he gets on their ship because the heroes will be camping for 2 days to suppress the chaos of the Civil War. That catches Quenzel's attention. Meanwhile, Recap looks down on the disgusting neglect in the underground city and gathers his warrior monks to search the premises. He soon enters with allegations of illegal trades and calls for Altea. Altea soon enters and states she runs a legitimate tavern and challenges the monks to bring up some proof. The monks soon call in a down-to-earth guy who explains that the guys here had offered to help him stow away. Although the guy snitched to be set free, Recap tells his men to squash the guy. Recap tells his men to slay everyone in the establishment, and they begin. One of the warriors gets into a fight with Weed, and Recap captures Pee-Pee, who he plans to end for not using his pardon well. Soon after, Quenzel shows up and cuts down a hanging object that falls in the middle and pushes away Recap, killing some warriors. Annoyed, Recap tells Quenzel fighting against them means he's going against one of the 7 heroes, but our boy doesn't give a fudge. The warriors come at him, but Quenzel cuts them down easily. Altea is surprised by his strength, but Recap manages to escape. Scared, he wonders how that little kid annihilated his whole team, and he fears telling his superiors. Soon after, he declares martial law. Meanwhile, Altea tells Quenzel he's insane to still be considering stowing away after the monks have declared martial law and have security everywhere. Quenzel tells her he can handle it, especially since there's a beautiful moonlit night. Oddly, Altea remembers someone who speaks just like Quenzel. Eventually, she decides to help them through a hidden route that the monastery knows nothing about. While that's happening, Recap hires a mercenary named Rongzats to help him extinguish these rodents. Inside the tunnel, Quenzel hurries through because he can't stand places where he can't see the sky and the air is stale. While running, Altea is attacked by some little monsters, but she slices them up. They continue their journey, but they're soon ambushed by a huge monster, and Altea becomes afraid that she's encountered the monster from 3 years ago. Immediately, Quenzel moves quickly and lands his sword on the monster's forehead, but it doesn't even make a dent. The monster smashes him into the roof, and our MC quickly realizes that plot armor won't protect him this time. It was at this very moment that Atli realized they're in a deep mess. Soon after, the ship they need to get on shows up. Weed tells Altea to get her act together and stop crying, but she cries that it's impossible to get to the ship and they're going to be killed by the monster. Pee-Pee soon begins to cry that she's not enjoying her life like everyone else. We all know what she's talking about. Me and you both, girl. As the monster comes in to eat them up, Weed pushes back the monster with his chakram. Weed realizes Altea isn't the real deal after all, so he wraps his weapon around the monster's leg to pull it down. The monster soon gets back up and lands a punch, but Weed picks Pee-Pee up and jumps out of the way. With his chakram, he creates a fracture in the monster's call, but the monster grabs the chakram and pulls Weed, who's now cocky, to himself. Eventually, he smashes into the wall, leaving the 2 ladies. Weed realizes they'll lose the ship, but Quenzel begins to shine bright pink under the power of the moon. As the monster's about to eat the girls up, Quenzel lands on its head and thanks the monster for opening up the roof. With one strike, he tears the monster's head in half and admires the beautiful moonlit night again. As they're about to leave, a huge beam of energy breaks the monster's body to pieces. It turns out to be the power of the sword of Rongzats' magic sword. Recap gloats about it and says they're here to cleanse them off the land. Somehow, Pee-Pee hears a strange sound, and the same sound affects Quenzel's hearing. Proudly, Recap explains that Rongzats was also a former smuggler, and he was able to find them through Rongzats. Annoyed, Altea insults Rongzats for selling out his former allies. Eventually, Recap gives the killing order, and when Rongzats raises his sword, Quenzel gets worried and tells the others to get back. He manages to block the immense energy released with his sword, surprising Recap and Rongzats. Quenzel becomes unsure if he can take Rongzats because his sword has too much power and begins to panic. However, Pee-Pee tells the adults that there are fairies imprisoned in the sword Rongzats is holding, and their shrieks release great power. The pain of the sound makes Quenzel cry, and Rongzats suddenly sheathes his sword, much to Recap's surprise. Rongzats explains that he's done his job to make them miss their ship, but he's worried about how the kid was able to divert his attack. Recap insists that it'll take a separate fee to eliminate these folks, and when Recap agrees, Rongzats fires again, and this time Quenzel can't withstand the power. After blowing them into a hole, Recap thanks Rongzats for his work, but Rongzats is surprised that he would run into Altea, whom he had known in the past. Meanwhile, Weade removes the wall that fell on them and tells the ladies they have to try to get to the ship. Apparently, there's someone he has to save quickly. He believes that Quenzel can pull his own weight if the kid is the person he suspects he is. Somewhere in the underground, Quenzel wakes up and wonders why he is. Recap comes close to finishing him and points out that he noticed that our guy could resuscitate through the glow of the moon. He points out that the glow of the moon can't reach where they are and calls out several highly trained warriors called the Holy Guardian Brotherhood to finish Coinzel off. Rasheb thinks it's overkill to summon such a strong group of warriors to deal with an ant like Coinzel, but this has become personal. While he's yapping, Coinzel looks at the roof of the building. He remembers something that happened in his previous life, where another man he looked up to, Erdnach, told him to leave and finish the mission, while he gave his own life for a faithful cause. In the present, Rasheb sends his warriors towards Coinzel and the fight begins. As our boy collides with their weapons, he realizes these warriors are actually good, and the warriors also realize the kid is stronger than average. The warriors keep fighting, but Coinzel jumps out of their way and approaches Rasheb because he doesn't have the time to play. He begins to chase Rasheb, who eventually trips. As the warriors leap forward to attack Coinzel, he sticks his sword in the ground and releases a purple energy that burns them away at once. Annoyed, Rasheb, who is the king of using underhanded methods, accuses Coinzel of using an underhanded method and asks him how he knew of a trap in the ground of the building that he made. Our boy tells him that he's been here before and he explored these halls years ago. In 3969 AD, Coinzel had been here with his friend Erdnach, who had given up his life when he was still Asherite. His friend told him that their forces fought Wishtek for control of this underground fort numerous times, and told him to commit the location of the magic circles to heart. Rasheb can't keep his mouth closed when he learns Coinzel had lived this life before, and Coinzel tells him he knows what lies beyond those mighty doors. He soon throws Rasheb through the doors and approaches the high priest, who warns him not to trespass on their sacred ground, but our boy doesn't listen to all his yapping. Coinzel walks past him towards the tree as the priest narrates how this place is the altar where Saint Erdnach, who was the attendant to the 7 heroes, worshipped. Apparently, the saint came with the 7 heroes years ago when they were fighting against Wishtek. Suddenly, Coinzel tells the high priest to quit his yapping. It amuses Coinzel that Erdnach, who sacrificed his life to complete the magic circle, is now being treated as an attendant of the 7. Confused, the high priest demands that Rasheb tell him who this kid is. Rasheb tells the high priest that this kid is a stowaway that wants to reach the 7 heroes on the other side. As Coinzel moves towards the circle, the high priest tries to stop him, but he doesn't listen. Coinzel moves towards the circle and sees his friend, who has now been turned into stone. He speaks to his friend that he's changed since when he last saw him, and tears pour out of his eyes. The priest calls him again and tells him about how he personally witnessed the power of the 7 heroes 23 years ago. Rasheb also tells the kid to listen as the leader of the monk order dishes out some wisdom from the past. The priest talks about how the 7 heroes fought against the Wishtek while Erdnach and Asherid rushed to set up the magic wall. Through the work of Erdnach, the 1,000 stone spears appeared. Apparently, the priest, who was a merchant at the time, witnessed it all, and he deemed this place a holy place. Because of his devotion, one of the 7 heroes, a landgrave named Stemwolik, tasked this guy with the responsibility of monitoring the border as the high priest. The entire speech makes Coinzel laugh, and he asks Erdnach if it's not funny that Stemwolik has become a landgrave. He tells Erdnach that he couldn't stop laughing about it after he heard the news when he returned. He recalls how Stemwolik was so excited that the emperor trusted a bandit like him to be a part of the mission. However, Stemwolik later roared with laughter when he killed the 3 other lances as well as himself to get rewards. As Coinzel recalls it, he burns with anger, and he tells Erdnach that he's done a great job protecting the empire. He eventually tells Erdnach to let him through, so he brings out his sword to put in the magic circle. The high priest becomes frantic and orders Rasheb to eliminate the kid, but Rasheb cowers because he knows he can't. Soon after, our boy breaks open the magic circle and energy rips through. Anger, meanwhile, Weed and the ladies rush to the port but find out they've missed the ship. As they're surrounded by warriors, Weed laments that he's failed Asherite. Suddenly, they hear a loud noise from the monastery. Soon after, the monastery begins to collapse, and Rasheb laughs as the walls collapse on him and his superior. Outside, they all watch as the 1,000 stone spears disappear and the warriors soon make a run for it. The ordinary people soon chase them with their farm tools in a bid to get to the other side. After the monastery collapses, Coinzel steps out and remembers how Erdnach told him that he can catch up to everyone if he returns here. Erdnach had told him that the magic circle will bind him in its grasp once he creates the magic circle. Erdnach told him to go help the others in the mission but told him he'd wait for him. In the present, Coinzel begs Erdnach for forgiveness for not being able to come back for him, and he promises to make sure the 7 adversaries are eliminated. Meanwhile, Rongzatz finds Rasheb crawling out from under a stone. Rasheb tells Rongzatz to help him because the true dominion of the monastery now rests in his hands since the high priest is gone. Soon after, the people find Rasheb under the stone, but Rongzatz ignores his cry for help and his offer of reward. Nearby, Weed and the ladies overcome a group of warriors trying to escape in a small aircraft. Weed mans the aircraft with the hope of chasing down the ship, but Altia doesn't look so excited. PP doesn't equally look so excited because Coinzel is missing, but our boy soon shows up on the back of a dragon that he stole. Meanwhile, the people see that the 1,000 stone spears that protect them are down, but the 7 soon appear, so the people rejoice that they're saved. Stremwillich is afraid that they're in trouble, but the others try to brace themselves. Sometime later, at the Moon Temple, a beautiful-looking priestess stares at the twin moon and becomes shaken. Her helpers rush to meet their priestess, and she begins to cry that the cosmic laws are changing. Meanwhile, Coinzel flies on the dragon to the encampment of the 7 heroes. Suddenly, he's ambushed by an aircraft. On the aircraft, a man named Rosen mentions that he feared that Coinzel would return. Even though this is disturbing, the man refuses to let Coinzel through and orders one of his warriors, Skimlajay, to shoot Coinzel's dragon down. Coinzel eventually crashes in the camp, but his eyes are set on entering the fortress to find the heroes. Suddenly, the gates of the fortress open and the 7 heroes step out. One of the men steps out, and Coinzel immediately recognizes him as Glenn, the one who took out his eyes, so he puts a sword to his neck. However, Coinzel suddenly realizes he can't move, and he wonders why. It turns out that another magician nearby is restraining Coinzel, so our boy tells him not to get in his way. Regardless, Coinzel struggles against the hold and manages to move his hand, which they find shocking. Eventually, Coinzel is held down by some ropes, forcing him to drop his sword. The people are riled up that this demi-human would turn his sword against Lord Glenn, and they demand his head. As Coinzel remains restrained in front of Glenn, Glenn decides to grant clemency to the boy. It surprises the people, so Glenn explained that the people of the borderland have suffered because of the warring times, and they've been unable to help them because of the wall in front of them. He explains that it's natural for this boy to have hatred towards them, and explains that they'd help the boy instead. Coinzel can't believe his ears, but the people praise Glenn for his loving heart. As the people praise Glenn, Coinzel realizes that Glenn did everything he did so he could achieve this luxurious life. Shortly after Coinzel is released, Rosen and his team rush to the site and learn that Glenn has set the boy free without any repercussions. Meanwhile, Coinzel walks away dejected, and he's soon ambushed by a huge bird that attacks him and carries him away. While Weed is flying the ship he stole, which he refers to as an old piece of junk, their ship is brushed by the bird that's carrying Kwanzel in its mouth. The bird is being driven by a lady who attempts to take out Kwanzel with her sword, but Weed sees this and collides into the bird. The move causes their ship to deflect until they crash into the ground. After crashing, the lady who kidnapped Coinzel rises up next to Coinzel's limp body and attempts to finish him off. However, PP steps between her and Coinzel. Does nobody find it odd that the perverted creators of this story are parading a girl that's like 11 years old in a bikini? Weed doesn't know what the heck is going on, and he recognizes the uniform the strange woman is wearing. For some reason, the strange woman is only wearing underwear. I can't imagine why this lady would even shop for armor at Victoria's Secret. The woman refuses to stand down and tells PP he'll eliminate her too, but PP tells her that Coinzel saved her and begs her to spare him. Annoyed, the woman attacks PP with her sword. Suddenly, Weed calls out to the girl and recognizes her as a princess. The woman looks back at Weed and recognizes him, so she asks him what he's doing here. Weed asks her the same question and why she's clad in the black avenging uniform. Meanwhile, Rosen tells the men he met that the boy they released is the hero of the borderland. Rosen tells them about how the rebels increased in the borderland and caused the people to suffer, but Coinzel annihilated them all 3 weeks ago. Rosen even confesses that he was unable to stop the boy even with all his strength, and that shocks the men. While that's going on, Weed is shocked to learn from the princess that Coinzel had managed to eliminate a person called Lord Krat, and that's why the princess has come for revenge. The princess declares that she's the 3rd princess, Ott, of the Charlundo clan, and she's here to avenge her brother's life. The princess prepares to drive her sword through Coinzel, but PP jumps in the way. Before the sword can touch PP, Coinzel pushes her away and gets hit in the leg. The princess attacks again, but Coinzel pushes PP out of the way and breaks the princess armor with the butt of his sword. When he points his sword at her, she collapses out of fear due to the spark in his eyes. Soon after, Coinzel also collapses. Meanwhile, at a town called Ahadod Shadow, the mayor is told some good news. Men from the Landgrave's military have come. The mayor tells the men that due to the collapse of the 1,000 stone spears, a lot of people have flocked into the city to see the 7 heroes, and he's become worried. However, a centurion named Duranpin assures him that he'll ensure no one starts trouble within the town. As it turns out, Altia has also managed to secure accommodation for the people in the same town. While going through the town, another elf that looks like PP introduces himself to her as Zephy and asks for her own name. When PP stutters and almost says her name, Altia catches up to them. Suddenly, Zephy's family comes around and recognizes Altia. They remind Altia that she once helped their entire family to stow away years ago, and they're grateful to her for helping them. When they talk about others like them, Altia breaks down in tears. Zephy asks Peepee if she'll accompany them since the people who escaped are gathering to create a village for their kind. Meanwhile, Coinzel wakes up and overhears Ott accusing Weed of despising his loyalty to Krat by aligning himself with someone who killed him. Wide explains that he will never make light of the loyalty he pledges to Lord Krat, but he reminds her that Lord Krat would not want her to seek this futile vengeance. That frustrates Ott, and she wonders what she's going to do. Eventually, Coinzel wakes up and he asks her if she wants to eliminate him. He morosely throws her a sword and asks her to take his life. Annoyed, Weed punches Coinzel across the room and realizes that Coinzel must still have unfinished business because of the solemn look on his face. Weed even calls Coinzel the man of the black sword and tells Ott this is the man he's been looking for. Because of that, he tells Ott that he can't eliminate Coinzel. However, Weed tells Coinzel that he's journeying with a woman named Sharon, the older sister to Ott and the sister of Krat, whom Coinzel had killed. About a month ago, Sharon departed to negotiate an alliance with another clan, while Weed was her bodyguard. However, Lady Sharon was abducted, so Weed tells Coinzel that he needs him to deliver Lady Sharon. When Coinzel says he doesn't know if he can, Weed demands to know what's gotten him so afraid. He recognizes Coinzel as the man of the black sword who took out all the rebels in the borderland, and he suspects that he's behind the collapse of the thousands of spears of stone. He begs Coinzel to lend him his strength to save Sharon, and adds that he can let Ott eliminate him after. Later, Quanzel steps out and Peepee comes to give him some soup to brighten him up. She shows him a new cloth that Zephy's mother made for her, but our boy doesn't seem stoked. However, we, the viewers, are glad this little girl is finally putting on some decent clothing. While they're chatting, Jarampin approaches them and Coinzel reaches for his sword, but soon finds out Jarampin is a friend of Peepee. Peepee introduces Jarampin to Coinzel and explains that he'll be accompanying her and her kind as they move to their new village. When Peepee mentions that Coinzel saved her life, Jarampin is glad and he empathizes with how rough Coinzel's journey must have been through the borderland.
Why are you gay?
Coinzel wonders why this man is being so nice, but I'm sure he's just secretly hoping this guy isn't into little kids. Soon after, Weed finds Jarampin and seems to have some unfinished business with him from the past. Meanwhile, some bandits hold some elves captive in the forest and are about to hand them off in a trade. Their operation is suddenly found out by Zephy, so they might attempt to eliminate him. In the camp, Weed attacks Jarampin and tries to get him away from the kids. When Jarampin asks him what he's talking about, Weed tells him to quit yapping and tell him where he's taken Sharon. Weed narrates how he saw the soldiers handing over Sharon to him, so Jarampin tries to calm him down so they can talk. When Weed calls Jarampin Octopus Head and accuses him of being a kidnapper, the huge man is honestly shocked by the accusation. With an atmosphere that seems to be filled with glitter, Jarampin explains that they're a band of honorable soldiers defending the people. When Weed insults his bald head again, Jarampin breaks out in tears and cries that no one sees him for who he really is. Even though he's soft, Jarampin is strong and breaks Weed's weapon with one hand. Soon after, Zephy runs to Jarampin to help him, and the men chasing Jarampin call him an octopus again. Annoyed, Jarampin knocks all three men down with one move. However, Jarampin becomes worried that he's gone overboard and asks the men if they're okay. Zephy thanks him and praises his strength, which makes Jarampin blush. I'm not even making this up. Zephy attempts to tell the centurion what he saw, but the bandits soon surround them and their leader tells Jarampin to hand the child to him. Annoyed, Jarampin shows the bandits his sword, which has a crest that belongs to the Landgrave military and the most loyal subordinate of Commander Fargo, and he tells them they'll face the hammer of justice. When the leader of the bandits hears that Jarampin is Fargo's subordinate, he shows Jarampin a sword with the same crest. Confused, Jarampin wonders what a bandit is doing with a crest that's given to officers. The bandit explains to him that Fargo has given them a secret mission and tells them that Stemwolik will protect them no matter what they do. Jarampin believes they're lying, so the bandits dare him to attack them. Eventually, the bandits demand that he hand over the child, and Jarampin begins to cry in confusion. At this point, I don't even know if this is a soap opera or anime. As the bandits are about to take Zephy, Coinzel gets tired of all this nonsense and slices them in half. The men watch in confusion, and the rest of the bandits attack Coinzel, but he soon cuts them down in one move. The leader of the bandits wonders how this kid did this and who he is. Coinzel asks the leader once more why the mighty Stemwolik didn't come to protect them. Annoyed, the leader shows Coinzel the crest again to scare him, but Coinzel cuts the sword in two and takes his hand with it. The guy soon begins to writhe in pain and calls out to the centurion to stop this boy from hacking the Landgrave crest in two. However, the centurion tells the guy he doesn't seem to know what he's gotten into. He tells him to start explaining how Fargo, the most trusted officer, would hand a crest to a miscreant like him. Suddenly, Fargo himself shows up and asks what the commotion is about. The bandit runs to Fargo, glad that he's saved. However, with a swing of his sword, he slices the guy's throat. Fargo picks up the sword the bandit dropped and explains that he commissioned the sword. sword. Apparently, the sword was stolen a month ago, and it had weighed on his mind. Geronpin, who was already in tears, is glad to hear that his brother had no association with these scoundrels. Eventually, Fargo praises Coinzel for dealing with the bandits and asks Coinzel for his name, but our boy doesn't seem stoked. When the air clears, Weed suddenly tells the men they've not earned his trust and demands from Fargo where he took Sharon. Eventually, Fargo promises to arrange a way for Weed to meet Sharon. Even though he can't disclose the specifics, Fargo explains that they're working to secure those with special powers around the borderland. He tells Weed to come see him about it later at the mayor's manor. Later, Ott is glad that she can see Sharon, and Weed realizes his journey will be over soon if this turns out to be true. Later that night, the bandits standing guard wonder why the rest haven't returned. They're soon given uppercuts that knock their teeth out. It turns out to be Geronpin and Zephy who have returned to save them. Meanwhile, Altea tells Coinzel she'll depart with the stowaways she helped in the past if all goes well. But Weed and Ott go to the mayor's manor as Fargo told them, but they're suddenly surrounded by the bandits that they took out earlier. The bandits seem to have been raised from the dead by some sort of necromancy, and when Weed sees Fargo watching them, he confirms his suspicions that Fargo couldn't be trusted. The bandits seem fiercer, and Weed soon starts fighting them. They're surrounded, and Weed asks Ott to escape, but Ott refuses because she won't be able to face Sharon if she does that. Some bandits almost take out Weed, but Ott cuts them in half. However, the cut bodies continue to move. Immediately, they both realize that this is magic from Wishtek, their rival land. As the twin moons appear, the dead bodies become more ghastly, and Fargo believes the two invaders are as good as dead. He recalls Geronpin's relief to learn he's not doing dirty work, and how he had to thank Zephy and Geronpin for saving the girls from the bandits. However, Fargo laments that it's a waste that the wretched girls they saved were remarkable specimens, and he becomes annoyed at Zephy. He soon puts on a mask. Meanwhile, Coinzel steps out and realizes the moons look beautiful. In a flashback, Pee-Pee remembers how she lost her family gruesomely, and she remembers how Zephy's father asks her to stay with them. She gladly agrees, and Zephy promises they'll build a happy village together. In Zephy's family's tent, Fargo sneaks in with his sword. Zephy's parents wake up and ask him who he is. Soon after, Pee-Pee goes towards their tent to check if Zephy's already asleep, but she sees a blood-stained sword tear through the tent material. Inside the tent, Fargo slaughters Zephy's mom and overpowers his father, while Zephy remains fast asleep. Zephy's dad manages to remove Fargo's mask, but Fargo drives his sword through him. When Pee-Pee whimpers due to horror, Coinzel somehow picks up her noise and senses a heavy despair in someone's heart. While that's happening, Weed and Ott are overpowered by the monsters, and Ott wonders why her Gryphon isn't here yet. Soon after, the Gryphon shows up and tears the monsters' heads up. The Gryphon lifts them from the place, and Ott drops down a thunder talisman to destroy the monsters. In the camp, Fargo goes to where Zephy is sleeping, but as he's about to eliminate him, Pee-Pee tells him to get away from him. She has wood in her hands and tears in her eyes. She demands why he'd do such a terrible thing after saying he'd help them. Bluntly, Fargo tells her it was all a lie and calls the demi-humans ignorant for not even thinking of doubting him once. Riled up, Pee-Pee rushes towards him with her piece of wood, and Fargo kicks her in the stomach. I really can't believe she saw that going any other way. I mean, there's a reason they say, don't bring a stick to a sword fight. She's kicked down next to Zephy, who seems to have been knocked out by taking some premium sleeping pills. Eventually, Fargo tells her he won't eliminate Zephy with his sword, so he summons some nasty creatures made from human bodies to deal with them. Scared, Pee-Pee realizes that this monster was created from the dead bodies of Zephy's parents. When the monster comes close, Zephy finally wakes up, but the parent monsters knock him meters away. When the monster raises its leg to crush Pee-Pee, Coinzel shows up and blocks it with his sword. When Coinzel sees the ghastly scene, he comforts Pee-Pee. Our guy looks at the full moon, and he summons his own magic tendrils laced with swords. For the first time, Fargo has this what the heck look on his face, and it seems this mate thought he was the only one who had magic powers. Coinzel looks at the faces of Zephy's parents, and he begs them to forgive him as he slices them down. Confused, Fargo demands to know what sort of an abomination this is. Look at the pitch black pot calling the kettle black. Fargo runs back and tells Coinzel to stay back. He even reminds Fargo that he's Landgrave Stemolek's commander, but Coinzel just slices off his arm. Fargo screams in pain, and he wonders who this brat is. Soon after, Weed and Ott reach the camp, and they see Coinzel's black swords. It's at that point that Weed understands why he's called the man of the black sword. Meanwhile, Coinzel accuses Fargo of slaughtering the weak and desecrating them with cursed magic. He accuses him of betraying those who trusted in him by shaming them even in their death, but Fargo tells him he doesn't give a fudge. Coinzel reminds Fargo that this is the fairyland where the Emperor faced the Wishtek forces in the war's final fight. The cherished soldiers lost their lives on this very land, but Coinzel is disappointed to see that this is the state of the military leader that should be protecting the emperor and the people. However, as all serial killers do, Fargo tells Coinzel not to assume he understands. Here comes the sad backstory. However, Coinzel isn't having any of that bull, so he tells Fargo that even the 7 heroes will feel the weight of payback. Nearby, the people of the land appear and find Coinzel and Fargo in an odd state. They recognize Fargo as their lord, and they suddenly conclude that Coinzel had killed everyone and is now planning to eliminate Lord Fargo. Before the people can reach him, Ott helps Coinzel fly away from the place on her griffin. When they reach a safe place, Weed is glad that he was able to get Coinzel's black swords. Eventually, Coinzel tells them he has something to do. Meanwhile, PP tries to explain to the elders of their people that Fargo was the one who killed Zeffy's mom and dad. However, they find it difficult to believe because Fargo has always been kind to them. In the outskirts, Ott approaches Coinzel while he's alone, and he wonders if she's here to take her revenge. She replies that she came to tell him she's sorry she is. When her brother died, it created a hole in her life, and she wanted to take it out on him. But she now realizes how stupid it was because Coinzel was actually the one who saved her brother. As she pleads for his forgiveness, Coinzel forgives her and tells her he knows she's a good person. Late that night, Rosen and his team go to meet Landgrave Stamolik, who is annoyed that they summoned him so late in the night. They soon tell him that the demi-human they pardoned is after their lives, but the Lord considers it a ridiculous matter because this kid is too little to scare his strong kingdom of warriors. He also tells them his castle has been fortified powerfully, and nothing will permit his death. However, Rosen keeps recalling what Coinzel said about killing all the 7 heroes who attain greatness through deception, and he doesn't know why. As Rosen is about to leave, Fargo is brought into Stemwolik's home, sorely wounded. Suddenly, Rosen hears that Stemwolik's troops are being mobilized, and he wonders if it's Coinzel's work. The soldiers begin to scan the sea and the air in preparation for their enemy, and Rosen realizes that Stemwolik was right, that his army is full of seasoned soldiers. Rosen decides that they must serve as the shield of the 7 heroes to keep order in the Empire, and he becomes so emotional that he begins to cry. Suddenly, the soldiers notice Ott's griffin in the sky, so they charge towards them on dragons. Meanwhile, Weed realizes security is tight, but Coinzel tells him not to worry. When they come closer, the soldiers fire arrows at them and they're chased from behind. In the castle, the Landgrave authorizes the use of a secret weapon. Both Weed and Rosen are shocked at the sight of the weapon, which happens to be magic artillery. Surprised, Coinzel asks if he knew about this machine, and Coinzel tells him he does, even though the castle's exterior has changed since the last time he was here. In a control room, a commander leads me to operate the machines. Apparently, the machine is so powerful that it once wiped out all of Wishtek's forces in one single blast. When Stemwolik sees the rebels, he tells Fargo to step aside so they can clean up the mess he couldn't deal with. Meanwhile, Coinzel recalls the time when they fought against Wishtek. Apparently, they captured this machine from Wishtek. At the time, Ashariot and Stemwolik, who was initially a bandit, were entrusted with the job of repairing the machine as a team while the soldiers were fighting at the warfront. In the present, Coinzel bears a deep grudge for Stemwolik. The Flying Dragon Brigade works together to push Ott's Gryphon towards the machine so they can be incinerated. While the Dragon Brigade and those on the walls fire arrows at them, Ott confesses she can't fight back because she's out of Thunder Talismans. Meanwhile, Coinzel considers how impressive these warriors are, just like in the past. Well, if they keep watching the warriors attack them like this, they'll probably die in an impressive manner too. However, Coinzel, who doesn't want to attack the soldiers, hopes they won't get in his way. Meanwhile, Rosen realizes there's a possibility for Coinzel to win because the moon is out, but he knows this will come at the cost of Coinzel killing the Landgrave military. But he knows that Coinzel is not that kind of man. Inside the control room, the technicians tell the commander that the systems are fully charged and ready to fire. However, what I don't get is what exactly they're looking at on these screens, since technology hasn't been invented in this timeline and they're basically using magic. Oh well. Meanwhile, Stemwolik gloats about the beauty of his army and their contraptions. When the Dragon Brigade gets in front of Coinzel, he brings out his black swords. However, instead of fighting against the men, he jumps into the blast coming from the machine. Everyone is certain he's dead, but somehow Coinzel and the Griffin are unscathed but enter into the machine. Stemwolik doesn't understand what is going on, and Rosen realizes that Coinzel had sliced the magic artillery's projectile because he was unwilling to shed blood. Oddly, this makes him laugh. Coinzel and the rest enter into the sewers, and Weed tells Coinzel his move was reckless. However, Coinzel explains that this was his plan all along and tells them he had brought them through a secret path in the machine that connects to a waterway that the soldiers don't know about. When they follow the path, they run into Garen Penn, who doesn't understand how Coinzel can know this path that is only known to the Landgrave and his retainers. Coinzel tells him he can't explain right now and asks him to let him get through. However, Jarampan tells them that they won't find the Landgrave and Fargo in the castle, but in a secret place called a shrine. Confused, Quenzel asks Jarampan why he's telling them this, so he recounts that he had seen Fargo take on a hideous form when he killed the demi-humans. He begins to cry again and explains that Fargo took him in when he was nothing and made him who he is. However, he is shocked to see all that is going on now, so he recounts to them that he was tricked into bringing the maidens into the shrine and Sharon was among them. With tears in his eyes, Jarampan apologizes for his sins, and even though Ott believes he may be lying, Quenzel tells them he believes him. Shortly after, Jarampan leads the three people to the entrance of the shrine and parades them as maidens he's bringing in. When the guard sees Quenzel, who's been a lady, he gets a hard-on and quickly opens the door. A while before, Jarampan had put some lipstick on Quenzel, while Weed laments that he has to dress like this. Jarampan tells them that the priests used to tell him that the ladies were sent to another place, but he didn't know the truth. In the present, instead of giving them over to the priests, Jarampan asks the priests to summon Fargo to him. Fargo soon comes out and tells Jarampan why he summoned him. Right in the presence, Jarampan asks Fargo to show him what lies behind the door and what evil things they've been doing to the women he brought. He tells Fargo that he saw him slaughter Zephy's parents. Eventually, Fargo gives up and acknowledges that Jarampan is onto him. This confirms to the other folks that Jarampan was saying the truth after all. However, Fargo tries to explain to Jarampan that he killed Zephy's parents as part of a secret mission to annihilate enemies of the Empire, but the power he used to do it is a secret one that wasn't sanctioned by the Landgrave. Apparently, the power was forced on him as a part of an experiment when he was a kid, and somehow Jarampan seems to be eating this nonsense up, even though Ott knows he's lying. Eventually, Jarampan asks Fargo if he can trust what he's saying, so Fargo gives him his word and explains that he can't reveal more information because he's taken an oath. Jarampan soon begins to recount his doubts, and it's clear this man has both the emotions and the intellect of a catfish. Jarampan tells the others that they were clearly misguided, and Fargo realizes the others are not women. While Jarampan is still apologizing, Fargo stabs Jarampan in the back full of holes. As Fargo is about to take out Jarampan completely, Quenzel comes in and cuts off the attack. Quenzel comes in to finish Fargo, but Fargo blocks the attack. When Fargo realizes he's in deep trouble, he tries to cut a deal and offers to give them back Sharon. However, Quenzel tells her he'll eliminate him, take the girl, and then eliminate Stemwolich. When Fargo realizes this isn't working, he laughs and shows them the corpse of whom he has already used for his black magic. He shows Jarampan the girls he brought, who he has now turned into black monsters. Jarampan stares in horror and begins to weep as usual. Annoyed, Quenzel runs to attack Fargo, but Fargo blocks his attack with one of his tendrils. Fargo pushes Quenzel back and tentatively tells him to surrender now because he doesn't stand a chance. Soon after, Fargo begins to attack Quenzel rapidly with his tendrils, and he knows all Quenzel can do is dodge, and he can't bring out his secret weapon. Weed asks Quenzel why he doesn't use his black sword, but Quenzel explains that he needs access to moonlight to be able to use his black sword. When Weed and At realize Fargo is too fast, they circle him to attack from the side while Quenzel comes in from the front. Regardless, Fargo releases his tendrils from all directions, forcing them away. Quenzel still remains in the air, so Fargo kicks his sword out of his hand and stabs him in the hand. As Fargo is about to finish him off, Jarampan quickly throws his sword at Quenzel, and our boy uses that to stab Fargo in the face. Serves his loud mouth right. Once that's done, Quenzel tells the others to follow him and leaves Jarampan there. Jarampan just continues to weep. In a flashback to 3968 AD, after they won the war, Stemwolich and Asheret rejoiced after they helped the soldiers win the war with the machine. Soon after, they decide to go meet Lord Glenn, and Asheret praises Stemwolich that he doesn't look like the small-time bandit that he used to look like. In the present, the priests standing with Stemwolich worry that Fargo may be struggling with the rebels, but Stemwolich tells them that Fargo will return bearing their heads. Aside from that, he asks them about the unique specimen they've gotten. It turns out to be Sharon, who possesses exceptionally potent fairy blood. Apparently, she embodies the perfect union of mortal flesh and fairy blood that they want to achieve, and they plan to use her body as a stereotype. Soon after, the priests at the entrance are torn apart, and Quenzel shows up in the shrine. As the priests panic, Stemwolich tells them not to panic because he'll confront this impudent rebel himself. However, Quenzel calls the Landgrave by his name and tells him he's not as sharp as before, and that surprises the Stemwolich. As Quenzel steps forward to deal with them, he hears Sharon groaning in pain as she's been experimented upon. When Weed and Ott hear it, they rush to help her, so Stemwolich tells the priest to deal with them. The priests turn on the light, and it displays an underground filled with bones of many people they've experimented upon. However, Stemwolich calls them mindless barbarians and tells them to show gratitude to him as one of the 7 heroes that saved their empire. He explains that Sharon will serve as a foundation upon which he will create his everlasting reign, but Quenzel tells him to shut his pie hole. Quenzel tells him it's a shame that he's fallen so far, and Ott and Weed go to cut Sharon free from the bind. When she can't speak, Weed demands to know what Stemwolik has done to her. Regardless, Stemwolik keeps calling them degenerates that have decided to go against their savior because of one insignificant demi-human woman. Still shocked, Coinzel asks Stemwolik what happened to him and reminds him of a time when he was once a noble warrior and risked his life for the citizens. More confused, Stemwolik wonders who this kid is and why he's looking at the Landgrave with such eyes. Annoyed, Coinzel promises Stemwolik to punish him for all his sins and charges at him. When he attacks Stemwolik, he leaps out of the way, and they wonder how he was able to move like that. When Coinzel attacks him again, Stemwolik blocks his sword too. Amused, Stemwolik tells Coinzel he's not so strong, and Ott goes to look for an exit. Stemwolik is certain that this boy is a mere demi-human child, but he asks one of his priests to prepare a secret weapon just to be safe. When Stemwolik attacks Coinzel, our boy dodges it. When he attacks Stemwolik, the man dodges it and kicks him. It's clear the old man's got some skills. Eventually, Stemwolik begins to attack Coinzel, and he has no choice but to dodge. Even though he admits Coinzel is skilled, he knows his body is too feeble, so he lands a cut on Coinzel. While Stemwolik is gloating, he soon realizes that Coinzel has cut him by his side, so Coinzel tells him his moves haven't changed. Annoyed, Stemwolik goes in for another attack, but Coinzel cuts him in the back again, and Coinzel tells him his combat is the same as before. Confused, Stemwolik charges in because he's in a rage, and he manages to land a skin-level attack. However, Coinzel knows that's how he fights and cuts him deep. Annoyed, Stemwolik demands from the high priests why he's still bleeding when they've used all the demi-human girls to fortify him. While Stemwolik and Coinzel continue their fight, Stemwolik realizes he's seen this boy's swordsmanship before. He demands from Stemwolik where he learned the technique, and soon learns from Coinzel's speech that he's Asherit. Stemwolik is shocked, but a black wind appears and Coinzel appears behind him. Before Stemwolik can respond, he gets cut in several places. Coinzel is also slightly wounded because his body can't withstand the power he just used. Bleeding to death, Stemwolik asks Coinzel how this is possible, so Coinzel reminds him of the things he did when he killed them. Confused, Weed wonders what Coinzel is doing. Att tells him that Coinzel is actually Asherit, known as the traitorous Lance. Shocked, Stemwolik demands to know how he's alive, but Coinzel attempts to finish him off. Before he can do that, several maidens show up to stop Coinzel, and it seems it's part of the experiments of the priest. Coinzel collapses to his knees and realizes he's too weak to fight, so Stemwolik tells the priests not to eliminate Coinzel. When Stemwolik gets up, he asks Coinzel the secret of how he still looks so young after 2 decades have passed, but Coinzel wonders if that's all he has to say to him. While the maiden warriors subdue Coinzel, he somehow perceives their cries, and he realizes they're still conscious, but he soon collapses. Stemwolik tells the high priest to bring out the flesh curse so they can study Coinzel's body. The reason Stemwolik is doing this is because he'll lose his praise and glory if he grows old, so he plans to use Asheria to continue his study. As the high priest moves ahead to put the curse on Coinzel, our boy begins to laugh, and huge tendrils like the one from Fargo come out of him, allowing him to impale all the priests at once. In a vision, Sharon hears strange voices, but hears one that's warm, gentle, and full of sorrow. It turns out to be Coinzel's voice. She soon wakes up and sees Weed, and is glad he came back for her. Meanwhile, Coinzel laughs like a maniac, so Stemwolik tells them to slay the monster. As the maidens are controlled to eliminate Coinzel, he uses his power to break the controlling helmet that covers their face, all the while laughing like he's heard a really good joke they can't hear. Coinzel continues to wreak havoc until he destroys the building and casts rocks on Stemwolik. However, Sharon can see that the maidens are being released from their suffering and are getting ready to enter their eternal slumber. She tells Coinzel not to blame himself and tells him the maidens are grateful to him. Eventually, Coinzel tells Stemwolik he's still the same scumbag he's always been and slices off his arm when he attempts to block his attack. Stemwolik begins to beg and tries to remind him of how close they were. So much for being 7 glorious heroes and saviors. In an instant, Coinzel cuts and smashes Stemwolik's body into pieces and realizes there are 6 more people to kill. As the stone spears that protrude from his body are destroyed, he collapses in pain, and Ott panics that his body has become thin. However, Sharon tells Ott not to panic because Coinzel will be alright. The shrine soon begins to collapse, and the lake water breaks into the building, so they decide to escape. Meanwhile, Duranpen weeps over the dead body of his brother Fargo. He remembers many years ago when Fargo welcomed him into the military because of his pure soul. Oddly, Duranpen asks Fargo for permission to call him Mighty Brother, and Fargo allows him. All those years, Duranpen had given his life to serve Fargo, yet he was unable to see the true nature of his brother or help those he killed, so now he laments that his life has been a waste. Soon after, Weed, Hat, and the others find him there, so they ask him what the heck he's doing. But as the building keeps flooding with water, Duranpen doesn't move an inch, but watches the water wash him him and his brother away. Later on, the strange priestess from before tells her attendants she saw a star that had been struck down by an arrow that glimmered with 2 colors. She recognizes that it's one of the 7 great stars, and the nobles around her realize there's serious trouble. Soon after, the soldiers of the castle see the griffin fly past them and they realize they've lost them. A while later, the nobles who heard the star reading worry that the interpretation is that one of the 7 heroes is down, so they decide to notify the emperor soon. A few days later, the soldiers are unable to find the rebels or the Landgrave. The soldiers soon learn that the nobles of the council have received an envoy from the capital, and the captains of the soldiers are summoned to a hall. When inside, they learn that they're holding a state funeral. The soldiers find that hard to swallow since they've not found the Landgrave's body, but the envoy from the capital informs them about the passing of the Landgrave. Even though the citizens will be in pain from this news, the envoy realizes that some individuals may attempt a coup, so the soldiers are charged to maintain order. After hearing this, the soldiers weep greatly for the loss of their Landgrave. While the people mourn, Pipi and Atlia move through the city because the military is not around. Pipi asks what's going on, and nearby nobles inform Pipi that their Landgrave was murdered along with Fargo. However, Pipi becomes excited that Coinzel must be responsible for this. The funeral procession soon begins, and Stemolek's body is paraded as the people pay their obeisance. Suddenly, Zephy runs into the crowd in tears because of the death of Fargo, and Pipi tries to stop him, but Altia doesn't allow her. Soon after, Weed finds Altia and Pipi, so he leads them to the rest. The journey is a very long one, but they eventually reach a faraway cave. Once inside, Pipi jumps to hug Coinzel with tears in her eyes because she was worried sick. However, she becomes worried when she notices Coinzel has become much smaller, so he informs her he's not in the best shape but will become better soon. Soon after, Altia points out that this cave isn't too far from the road and wonders if they're safe. To assure her, Weed explains that Coinzel made sure they'll be safe by putting them near a special place. Moments later, Coinzel leads them to a special valley where the graves of soldiers of the Landgraves who lost their lives are. Many of them are comrades of Coinzel who fought by his side 20 years ago in the Great Water. Confused, Altia wonders what they're talking about, so they inform her about Coinzel's past life and how he was brutally murdered. Shocked, Altia realizes she and those she helped escape were longing for a place ruled by dreadful men, and the memory of Zephy's parents makes her cry. Suddenly, Coinzel thanks them all and heads back. However, Pipi points to an odd sight, so Coinzel sees the funeral procession of the Landgrave, which annoys him. Apparently, the men have come here to erect a gravestone for their heroic Landgrave, and they pay their obeisance in tears. Pipi cries because this terrible funeral is held in honor of terrible people, and Weed knows that no one saw those snakes for who they really are. Eventually, Coinzel tells them that the fact remains that he's a traitor that has killed a hero of the Empire. However, he clarifies that he will take down the rest of the 6 heroes even though the people love them. Because of this, he advises them to step away while they still can. Later that night, they all go to sleep. When Altia notices Pipi can't sleep, she asks her if she wants to go with Coinzel. Pipi realizes that going with Coinzel will be dangerous and she'll just get in his way, but she doesn't know what to do. As tears fill her eyes, Altia tells Pipi she won't be the only one going along, even though it'll be hard. Meanwhile, Ott goes to burn her military uniform, so Sharon realizes that she's made up her mind to accompany Coinzel. The next morning, Weed, who's with Sharon, thanks Coinzel for everything. However, he apologizes because he has to go take care of someone now, but promises to repay this debt in his own way. But Ott, Pipi, and Altia choose to follow Coinzel, and that surprises him. In Stemwolek's castle, Rosen is charged with informing Lord Glenn of everything he knows about this strange rebel. Annoyed, Rosen promises himself to take out Coinzel, since he's a knight of the Order of the 7 Spears. Sometime later, a certain soldier prepares some hot-looking girls for his boss, Battery Grave Bearstar, one of the 7 heroes. When the ladies enter Bearstar's bedroom, he looks at them in annoyance and angrily slays one of the ladies when he sees her earring twinkle. When his soldier enters, Bearstar tells him to look at her pointy earring, which shows she was here to assassinate him. I don't know if this guy is also as crazy as his boss, or maybe it's because Bearstar is currently holding a sword, but somehow he agrees with Bearstar that the lady must be an assassin. In a flashback, the Emperor summons all 6 remaining heroes to break the news of Stemwolek's death. He orders them to find the despicable rebel and deliver justice. One of the heroes tells Bearstar that he may be the next target of the rebels based on the structure of the map, but Bearstar becomes paranoid and promises to teach Coinzel a lesson. In the present, some of the Bearstar soldiers are sent to a nearby demi-human village under his command named Lemda to destroy it. Confused, one of the elders asks why the Battery Grave is doing this to them, so the soldier informs them that the criminal who murdered Stemwolik might be hiding there. While they're chatting about what Coinzel might look like, Coinzel shows up and asks them why they're pillaging villages in the name of a manhunt. He calls them a bunch of trash, and their captain sends his men towards Coinzel, but one of the soldiers seems to recognize Coinzel. Before he can warn the others, they charge at Coinzel, who slices them up. Meanwhile, in the free city of Julis Ablas, a man tells Altea about how he's seen more of Bearstar's people in the streets. In a tavern, Ott and Peepee do a performance in lingerie, and the men go wild. Someone call child support. When they finish, Altea praises the girls. Ott wonders why the men get so excited over such a lame show, and Peepee wonders why she can't wear decent clothes. However, Altea tells them they look great. Apparently, they're working with one of Altea's associates named Titria, who also owns a pub in this city. Apparently, Ott and Peepee's dance show has become the talk of the town. Ah, the good old days, when women didn't nag about their husbands going to strip clubs. Regardless, Peepee laments that they're in this trouble because Coinzel left them for a mission. Meanwhile, Coinzel goes around the city disguised as a woman. He goes to get a map but finds out the top half is missing. The seller informs him that the Battery Graves castle was constructed in the northern mountains, and distribution of the map of the area has been banned since then. It's been hard to gather intel, so Coinzel realizes he has to be precise with his attack. At the tavern, a play is done about how the innocent people of the borderland have been murdered by the mad demi-human, referring to Coinzel. The director tries to teach them that the rebel is still at large, and they need to be careful. Soon, some soldiers scatter the play, calling it sick. When the director is confused, the soldiers bluntly explain that they came to see the nice behinds that the entire city has been talking about, and not this nonsense. Ott tries to go settle the fight, since she knows the soldiers came to see her package anyway, but Altea tells her to hold on a bit while the soldiers roughhouse. When one of the soldiers almost attacks one of the actors, Ott rushes to stop the blade with a stick, but the soldier slashes her stick in half. Annoyed, the soldier attempts to attack her, but a strange guy named Itchface that has been watching the play knocks the soldier down. Altea thinks the boy is cute. Itchface asks them if they're not hurt and soon starts chatting with Ott about how elegant her martial art dance was. Annoyed, the soldier asks Itchface how he dare mess with the soldier, but he tries to explain that the play was helpful to motivate the people. Still angry, the soldier and his boys move in to attack him. Meanwhile, Coinzel hears that the soldiers of the Battery Grave are causing problems at the bar. Inside the bar, the soldiers moan in pain because of how much the boy from before had roughed them up. When he steps out, Coinzel sees him and it disturbs him. Also, when Itchface passes Coinzel, he mistakes him for a girl but wonders why he can perceive a strong aura from Coinzel. Later, Itchface guy meets with Rosen, who has come a long way to get him. When he enters Rosen's aircraft, he asks him if he knows about the hero-killing rebel lurking in the area. Rosen explains that he's gotten the aid of 4 knights who are searching the city and there's no need to be concerned. Rosen tells him the rebel is quite strong and had almost killed him when they fought, even though he was going easy on him. Itchface realizes Rosen wants him to sit this one out while the knights search, but he wishes otherwise. Shortly after, at the fort in the central region, a superior of the soldiers who were beaten berates the soldiers for causing trouble at the bar. More so, he finds it disdainful that they were humiliated by a strange person who beat them up and spared their lives. When the Lord learns that the soldiers' arms were dislocated, but the soldiers of the free city had helped them pop them back in, he decides to break one of their arms by himself. The next morning, the Lord of the Free City has a meeting with an esteemed lady. The Lord is wearing pretty chill glasses, and it's clear why his city is called Free City. Suddenly, a huge stone is shot at the place they're having a meeting. It turns out that the catapults were shot by the military of Battery Grave Bearstar. The Lord of the Free City wonders what's going on, and one of the men of the Battery Grave tells him that he's under suspicion of sheltering the rebels in his city. However, the Lord explains that the soldiers of the Battery Grave were released the night before with no injury sustained. But the officer shows them one of the soldiers with a broken arm and asks the Lord to explain this. He tells the Lord to hand over the rebels or they'll sweep through his city. Suddenly, the lady from earlier introduces herself and the rest of her team as Knights of the Order of the Seven Spears. She considers the men of Bearstar barbaric and accuses him of hurling a catapult at a free city without warning. She tells him to withdraw his military and calls him a lowlife, and that annoys him. When he demands to know who she is, she introduces herself as Elsiria Ronclave, daughter of Elector Ronclave, one of the men who is in charge of electing the new emperor. When she mentions that, the Lord of the city is shocked that the daughter is working as a knight employed by Lord Glenn. Shocked, the officer stops their pillaging and begs for his forgiveness. Elsiria decides to pardon him, so the officer even offers to give some of his men to help her. Meanwhile, in Rosen's aircraft, Itchface asks if the 4 sent out are strong, so Rosen tells him they're not as strong as him. However, 2 years ago, when the nobles of a city rebelled, the general requested reinforcement from Lord Glenn, and he dispatched those 4. They forced their way through the enemy line and took the rebel leader's head. Rosen believes that no single man can take the rebel, but he hopes that the 4 may be able to defeat Coinzel together. However, Itchface asks Rosen for the chance to prove himself this time and eliminate the rebel on his own, but Rosen doesn't allow it. The next day, PB looks for Coinzel, but her room is soon infiltrated by the 4 knights. At this point, the 4 heroes are exhausted by the fact that they've been looking around for a long time. When they are about to leave, the fairy they're using to search around starts to act strange, so they begin to investigate. When they step out, PB realizes that the fairy is the same one gazing at Coinzel some time ago. She realizes there's trouble and decides to go inform Altea. Meanwhile, Coinzel realizes he will have a problem leaving the city. Even though he can force his way out, he doesn't know where Bearstar's castle is or the road. Not long after, the 4 knights track down Coinzel using the power of the fairy. Immediately, Elsiria and her team attack Coinzel, but our boy jumps out of the way. Soon after, our guy learns that these guys were sent by Rosen. Meanwhile, Rosen and Itchface reach their hometown, which Itchface finds so exciting. However, Rosen seems worried about something. In the town, there's a sword academy, and the students there are shocked to see Lord Glenn training there. However, the master of the Hall of Swords, Master Glia, isn't surprised because Glenn used to be a great student of the academy. When an intruder soon attacks Lord Glenn, the students try to defend him, but it turns out to be Ishface, who's just playing with Lord Glenn, who's an old friend. The students wonder who this is, so Ishface introduces himself as an ordinary swordsman who owes his life to Lord Glenn. It turns out that Ishface was summoned here by Lord Glenn, who would like to speak with him. When inside, Lord Glenn speaks about the hero killer who killed Stemwolik. However, Ishface is such a loudmouth that he points out that Coinzel is the bandit that Lord Glenn let go when he attacked him in his encampment. Eventually, Lord Glenn points out that he left Ishface under Master Glia's tutelage 5 years ago, so it's time for him to prove himself by bringing him the head of the hero killer and restoring the name of his family. Gladly, Itchface accepts the mission. That night, the other fighters in the Order of the 7 Spears are angry that Lord Glenn would give such an important mission to such a snotface like Itchface. However, one of them, who knows about Itchface, points out that Itchface has been serving Lord Glenn before the Order of the 7 Spears. Apparently, the boy is one of the best swordsmen of their time, and he's the man who's in line to take up the Black Wind Sword crest of the Swordmaster, which only a chariot had successfully mastered. Later, Lord Glenn asks Master Glia if she's still resentful towards him for having slain Asherite. She confesses that till she dies, she will still be in mourning for her beloved Asherite. Apparently, Asherite had achieved at 16 even things that the previous Swordmaster was unable to do. In a flashback to the time of the war, Chariot told Master Glia goodbye, and she prayed he would come back safe. However, when it was announced that the war had ended, Master Glia was devastated that Chariot wasn't named among those who returned. In the present day, she still finds it unbelievable that her sweet little Asherite would betray the Empire. Eventually, Glenn confesses that he has sinned by slaying his friend 20 years ago. But after all these years, he admits that he was envious of Asherite's skill and bravery. Glenn confesses that he struggled to keep up with him, and he was proud to be picked to join Asherite's mission. During the mission, the 7 of them were united with the 7, but they eventually parted. He tells Glia that the 4 dealt alone with Wishtek, but it was a grave mistake they made. He explains that he believes that all 4 of them had tried their best the way they could to help the Empire, and he considers that he could have forgiven them and turned them back to the right part. When Glia hears that the men never turned their backs on the Empire, she cries because he had smeared their names as traitors instead of protecting their honor. Even though Glenn pleads, Glia tells him she despises him for killing her prodigy, whose skill even outshined her own. She promises him he'll pay for this, but Glenn tells her he'll have no other choice but to take her life if she comes to take his life. Glenn adds that he will use any methods at his disposal to protect the Empire, so Glia admits that she's sworn to protect the Empire. As such, she has to set aside all personal issues. Either that, or she doesn't want to get on Glenn's blacklist. She tells him she's also grateful to him for bringing Itchface to her. Meanwhile, Coinzel runs away from the knights, and Elsiria asks him why he can't face them to fight with dignity. Coinzel realizes he had to stash his gear for this disguise, and it has backfired. Suddenly, Ott comes to join Coinzel, and Coinzel asks her what she's doing here. Elsiria tries to warn Ott that Coinzel is a hero killer. Ott tells her she doesn't give a fudge. 8 tells them they've never seen their hero save someone and weep for those who they couldn't save, but she has seen her own hero do that. She leaps into the fight despite Coinzel's warning, and Coinzel has to join the fight. Annoyed, Ott tells Elsiria that she'll defend her hero even if it costs her her life, then tells her to stop calling him a rebel. Elsiria and Ott soon start fighting, while Coinzel is left to fight the others. In a flashback, Ott tells Coinzel that she knows he wants to keep them out of her, but she believes he's a true hero. As such, she wants to fight beside him and doesn't want to be a burden to him. In the present, the Mage of the Night hits Ott with fire, so Quinzel tells her to retreat. One of the knights realizes that Quinzel keeps getting distracted because of his ally, so he uses the opportunity to throw a blade in Ott's back. Quinzel is forced to jump down to save her, and he jumps into a boat that Altea had prepared. Even if they've slipped away, the mage among the knights says his fairy has memorized the rebel's scent, so they're certain they'll find him soon. In the boat, Quinzel pleads with Ott to go home. He tells her he won't fight with someone so untrained and says she'll keep getting in his way. Meanwhile, Battery Grave Bearstar is angry with his soldiers for withdrawing their attack. When he hears that Ronclave's daughter was involved, he angrily commands his soldiers to destroy Julius Ablas. Later that night, Altea takes them all to an underground storage facility and asks them to hide here for a while. However, Quinzel is certain they'll sniff him out as long as he's in the city. Altea points out that the city is full of those who sought refuge from the tyranny of the Battery Grave Magistrate, so she suggests they tell them Quinzel's real name and the truth behind the 7 heroes. However, Quinzel refuses because the Empire would deem the city as insurgents and would destroy them. Regardless, Altea tells Quinzel he can't win the fight alone. While alone with Ott, Quinzel tells her she's a skilled fighter and asks her to continue to develop her skills. He's certain that she will become better, but he explains that he can't bear to see her die in his presence. He tells her he has to leave her in the city, but Ott begs him to allow her to follow him. Quinzel eventually leaves, and he wishes he would stay with Ott. He knows if things hadn't gone the way they did, he may be a trainer in the sword school training people like Ott right now. However, he soon bursts his own bubble, recalling his future was shattered 20 years ago. The next morning, Quinzel runs into Elsaria and her men again. Meanwhile, Altea receives information that the knights are fighting Quinzel in the city. When Ott hears that, she gets up to go help Quinzel despite her weakness. In the city, Quinzel and the knights engage in combat. Meanwhile, a woman tells her children that this person the knights are fighting is the villain who is trying to eliminate the 7 heroes. While fighting, Quinzel notices he can't move again. It turns out that the mage's fairy is creating a barrier that will stop his movement and will drag him into a deep sleep because of his fairy blood. When Quinzel collapses, he's told that the Bearstar will be here shortly. Meanwhile, the Bearstar begins to hallucinate in his castle about the hero killer, and his officers begin to worry. Inside the city, Elsaria tries to slash Quinzel, but he blocks her attack with a shield. She's surprised he can still move, but he asks her to get out of his way because he has no business with her. When she tries to slash him again, he jumps out of the way. Soon after, Ott shows up with a talisman that destroys the barrier. As the men attack Quinzel, Ott jumps in to block the attack. Elsaria attacks Quinzel, but Ott continues to block the attacks. Oddly, Quinzel notices that Ott's fighting style has changed. It turns out that Ott had picked up what Quinzel said about keeping her eyes on her enemy, and she's using it to fight. It surprises Quinzel that she could do this with one piece of advice. He recalls how his master and assistant instructor Glia had tried to instill this exact type of undefeatable will in him years ago. When Quinzel jumps in to help Ott, Elsaria notices once more that Quinzel doesn't seem to be behaving like a rebel at all. Suddenly, the walls of the city are broken down and Ott is knocked down and injured. This shocks Quinzel, and fiery arrows are soon shot into the city. Before Elsaria can respond, Quinzel escapes with Ott. Quinzel manages to get Ott to a safe place. As she bleeds out, she asks him if she fought well and if he's proud of her, and Quinzel says he is. As life begins to seep out of her, Quinzel tells her it's not time for her to go. He asks her to show him how strong she's become and promises to train her. Suddenly, Quinzel cuts his tongue and pours his blood into her mouth to give her a share of his life force. In a short while, Ott is transported to a different dimension and begins to experience painful and powerful energy. Quinzel pleads with her to endure it and begs her to accept his blood. This turned into a vampire siring real quick. Meanwhile, the military of the Battery Grave takes over the Free City. However, Elsaria goes to confront the officer and demands to know why they're doing this. She demands that they stop, but the magistrate of the Battery Grave refuses because this free city is sheltering the hero killer and the Battery Grave has ordered them to take it down. When she demands their proof, they tell her they don't need any. They plan to execute the city's lord and send a report of the city's rebellion to the capital. The magistrate tells Elsaria that he'll have to slaughter them if they intervene. Frustrated, Elsaria demands that her men develop a plan because they can't ignore such barbaric acts. Meanwhile, Quinzel remains with Ott, who's now limp. In a vision, Quinzel sees Ott telling her dead brother that she's happy because she made Quinzel proud with her fighting. However, her brother tells her it's not yet time, and Quinzel says the same. Suddenly, Ott comes back to life and sees Quinzel by her side. Quinzel tells her that it will be a while until the moons emerge in the sky and grant her her powers, so he asks her to rest and find him when she's ready. Meanwhile, the woman who had told her children that the 7 heroes are the good guys runs away as the soldiers pillage the city. Meanwhile, Altea's friend, Titrea, leads them to the Lord's mansion because the Vigilante Corps are stationed there. Meanwhile, at the Lord's mansion, a prominent fighter among the people named Algro leads the people to fight against the invaders, but the captain of the Vigilante Corps refuses to let them throw their lives away. When tensions rise, Algro and the captain draw their swords against each other, but Altea soon arrives and tells the men to stop. In the city, calamity continues and Elseria demands a plan from one of her men. The only thing her most able man tells her is that they'd have to eliminate Bearstar to cause this war to cease. This disturbs Elseria, who had joined the knights to serve the emperor and the empire. Now, she can't stomach the sight of a hero she serves going against true justice. It makes her remember what Ott said about how the hero she's protecting fight, and she doesn't know what to do. The commander of the Battery Graves military is happy with the fact that there's minimal damage done to the city, but the magistrate points out this is not enough. He orders the commander to tell the soldiers that there are many more rebels in the city, so they're asked to go through everything and deal with them as they see fit. The instruction shocks the commander, but he's forced to obey his superior. The soldiers continue to eliminate men and later apprehend the woman who is escaping with her children. As her son tries to defend her, one of the soldiers punches the boy, and Elseria, who's now in tears, is held back by her men. As the children plead with the soldiers, Coinzel steps in to behead the soldier attacking the woman. When the soldiers see that Coinzel is the hero killing the rebel, they're surprised that he's just a kid. One of the leaders of the soldiers tells them to get the kid since he's so weak, but the soldiers appear scared. When Coinzel riles them up, they charge at him, but he tears through them like a knife through butter. They even fire arrows, but he dodges them and cuts down the leader who told them to attack. While fighting, Coinzel tells the woman and her child to escape. But Elseria, who has been watching the whole thing, doesn't know what to say. At the Lord's mansion, the Lord of the Vigilante Corps and Algro recognize Altea because she had helped them escape from the border town. She confronts them about wasting their lives after she helped them escape, but she tells them she won't allow it. On the battlefield, the commander of the soldiers is shocked that the hero-killing rebel is just a weak little kid. Soon after, he's told that the armed civilians and the Vigilante Corps have joined arms to fight the raiders. The fool soon realizes he just called their men raiders and rephrases that they're fighting against their men who are hunting the rebels. On the streets, Altea, Algro, and the Vigilante Corps continue the fight. The Lord of the Vigilante Corps tries to get Altea to evacuate the city, but she refuses to abandon the people. She tells him about how she didn't care about what happened to those she helped while in the smuggling business. However, when she found out how peaceful they were after they escaped and saw wicked men take that away from them, she refused to let them die again. Soon after, Elseria and her men notice that the soldiers are retreating, and they're impressed by the fact that Coinzel has single-handedly weakened the Battery Graves military. However, they notice he's getting weaker, so Elseria's men ask her if she wants to fight alongside Coinzel. They find it hard to believe that they've joined forces with a hero killer, but Elseria decides that they need to protect the people. Before they can act, the soldiers are cut down from behind, and it turns out to be Ott. Ott also has little wings springing out of her body, just like Coinzel. With great precision and speed, she cuts down several soldiers and goes to meet Coinzel. Her body appears to have shrunken just like Coinzel's, so she covers his behind while he fights. The soldiers soon lose morale and run away like the sissies that they are. While they run, they're blocked by Elseria and her team, and at this point, the soldiers of the Battery Grave wish they didn't come to work today. While they're fighting, Elseria realizes that Ott really believes in Coinzel. Meanwhile, the magistrate gets on a dragon to return to the castle to get support from the Battery Grave. He tells the commander to stay here and organize the front and warns him not to consider retreating. The commander tries to stop him, but the magistrate takes off like a NASCAR race car. The commander orders his men to not retreat, but they don't listen to him and run away. He tries to punch them and calls them cowards, but when he sees the crowd chasing after them, he realizes only cowards live to tell the story. Algro and his men soon take over the siege, but they see a strange beam of light. In a split second, a bright energy breaks out from the light and kills the men, tearing the city in half. After the hit, the dust clears and Bearstar's castle soon shows up. Apparently, Battery Graves' castle is an aircraft equipped with magic artillery. When the commander of the army sees his master, he begins to gloat as if he hadn't just been running with his tail between his legs. Elseria wonders why the Battery Grave would be in possession of Wishtekian magic artillery, but Coinzel is glad that Bearstar has saved him the trouble of having to find him. Soon after, soldiers on dragons and elephants are sent as reinforcements. When one of the elephant officers tells the previous commander to round up the remaining soldiers, he's soon torn down by a hit from Bearstar's machine. Inside the ship, Bearstar frantically laughs and tells his technicians to smash everything to bits. The technician tries to tell Bearstar that his army is below them, but the battery grave tells them to destroy everything because they're of no significance. When the commander of the foot soldiers realizes he's going to get killed by his master, he tries to run away, but he's soon apprehended by Elsaria and her men. It turns out that Algro hadn't died, but had only passed out, but he soon sees the ghastly sight of the Bearstar's reinforcements. A building falls on him as he despairs that this is the end, but Coinzel soon cuts it in pieces and saves him. After Coinzel saves him, Algo is surprised that demi-humans that look like children just saved him. Shortly after, Coinzel and Ott climb up the buildings to attack the dragon army. Meanwhile, the citizens try to run to safety. While Altea and Pipi are running, they find a woman crouched with her dying son. They try to get her to run away from Bearstar's ship, but she tells Pipi not to worry because she's certain the heroes will arrive to save them soon. However, inside the ship, Bearstar, the nearby hero, rejoices because the city is ablaze. While that's happening, Coinzel and Ott track down the dragon. Our guy leaps into the sky and summons his black swords to tear down the men on the dragon at once. Immediately, Ott leaps onto one of the dragons and knocks down its rider. Soon after, Coinzel jumps down to meet the people. When one of the men asks the captain of the vigilante group if he knows who Coinzel is, he tells them he doesn't know, but he thinks he's their hero. Meanwhile, Algro leads some of the men to fire arrows at the dragons to shoot them down and provide cover for Coinzel, whom the people refer to as their hero. For a moment, Pipi and Altea become emotional that they're calling Coinzel their hero, and they know the truth. When a few soldiers attack Coinzel, he cuts them down and leaps on Ott's dragon. When the magistrate realizes they can't deal with this guy, he tells the others he has an urgent mission to deal with for the battery grave, so he tells them to deal with this problem. As the magistrate flies away, what the heck's expression appears on the soldier's face, and they realize they're toast. The magistrate flies to the latest flagship of the Dragon airship fleet commissioned by Lord Glenn. He plans to gain control of it to use its magic artillery to burn everything down. Isn't it odd how it looks like this magistrate is always ditching his folks, but he isn't? Suddenly, the aircraft he's about to deploy goes airborne. It turns out that Elsaria is controlling the aircraft, and she ties the commander she kidnapped to the ship. She considers it shameful that they're taking advantage of this commotion to steal Glenn's flagship. Meanwhile, Bearstar sees the ship flying towards him, and he's impressed that he was able to get the ship. He even gets angry when he sees Glenn's crest on it and wonders why only Glenn gets the good stuff. In a flashback, Bearstar remembers his request to build a flagship was rejected, but they allowed Glenn's ship to be built in the Free City, which is in his domain. It annoys Bearstar terribly, and he hates the fact that Glenn is being raised over him when they're supposed to be equals. In another flashback to 20 years ago, the 7 lances gather around the fire and talk about how the other 4 have gone crazy. They're certain the other 4 have no chance of returning alive and completing the mission successfully. They believe the mission was too much of a risk, but Bearstar worries that Asherite can actually get the job done. He's annoyed that they remain a bunch of commoners compared to Asherite regardless of how much they're given. Bearstar and another one believe that the other 4 might complete the mission, but they're certain Asherite and the others are honorable enough to conceal that the 7 didn't participate. However, Asherite refuses to live the rest of his life indebted to Asherite and the others. In the present day, Bearstar is glad he now has the flagship, and he plans to blame it on those in the Free City and hide the ship. He laughs maniacally as he continues his schemes. Meanwhile, Coinzel tells Ott to fly to the castle, and he lures the soldiers towards him to take them out. However, Bearstar doesn't know Elsaria is in the ship, so he thinks Coinzel has flown into the line of fire between the flagship and the castle. When Bearstar tries to hit Coinzel and misses, Elsaria tells her men to assault the floating castle. Her men ask her if she's sure, and she tells them she's certain. She regrets drawing her men into this and soiling her father's name by going against the 7 heroes, but she knows her father taught her not to turn her face away from injustice. Outside the flagship, the magistrate realizes he can't take back the flagship on his own, so he flies to the castle. While he's flying to the castle for help, a beam of fire burns him down and hits the castle. Bearstar's castle starts to shake, and Bearstar's face develops into something like a comic book caricature. Frantic, he tells his technicians to fire back, but Elsaria's men evade the attack. While that's going on, Ott and Coinzel reach the castle. Coinzel jumps through one of the windows to get Bearstar and tells Ott to come back for him. Bearstar, who was confident a moment ago, starts to scream like a little girl. Meanwhile, Rosen and Ishface fly towards the Free City. Ishface aches to be able to fight Coinzel on his own, but they soon see the Free City destroyed and can't understand what they're seeing. When Rosen wonders what the castle is, Itchface mentions that he heard that the Bearstar had his castle reconstructed in an unknown place. Immediately, Rosen realizes that Bearstar had illegally built a fortress behind the capital's back. However, all that Itchface can think of is the prospect of his name being known if he manages to eliminate Coinzel, who may just succeed in killing Bearstar. Inside the castle, Bearstar starts to remember Ishariot and finds it odd. Outside, Elsaria continues to fire at his castle. She plans to drag the battery grave out so he can answer for his crimes. However, Coinzel eventually tracks down the Bearstar, who's trying to escape. The odd part is that the Bearstar soldiers are fighting over who gets to escape in the last pod, and they don't seem to give a fudge about their boss. This, folks, is why you should treat your workers well. Elsaria fires again, and the destruction allows Coinzel to find the battery grave. When Bearstar sees Coinzel, he remembers when he was young, his father gathered great stone masons to build great batteries despite not getting money for it. However, his father did it for the people, and because he's certain the Emperor will repay him if the war is won. It was at that time that his father suggested that he sign up for the mission that the Emperor was finding warriors for. His father didn't care about him bringing glory to his family, but pleaded that he come back alive. Later on, during the mission, Bearstar is almost killed by a monster, but Asherite saves him. In the present, Asherite tells Bearstar to stand up like a man, but Bearstar oddly seems to recognize him as Asherite. Bearstar soon begins to hallucinate and talk about how he wanted to continue his father's business, but his father told him he was too incompetent. He begs Coinzel to help him get back to his father's hometown, and Coinzel remembers that Bearstar always wanted to go back home and become a successful merchant. In the present, Asherite cuts Bearstar down. As he kills him, tears fall from his eyes because his old friend, Bearstar, has lost sight of the simple life he always dreamed of. Shortly after, Ott flies into the castle to find Coinzel. However, she's soon driven away by Rosen's aircraft, and the men see Coinzel standing over Bearstar's body. Oddly, this makes Itchface smile. The men highlight the aircraft, and Coinzel tells them that's 2 heroes down. Rosen tells Coinzel to stop the bloodshed, but our guy replies that he can't stop this far. Suddenly, Itchface mentions that great rewards are waiting for him when he returns with the head of the hero killer. Rosen tries to caution him, but Itchface says he'll not let Master Glenn die like this too. Eventually, Itchface introduces himself as a serving knight under Glenn and plans to slay Coinzel. When Itchface takes his stance, Coinzel becomes surprised because he's seen the stance before. Both men soon begin a sword fight, and Coinzel soon remembers the training from Glia. While they're fighting, Itchface asks Coinzel to show him the secret technique of the Black Wing. Itchface plans to become the assistant instructor at the hall in time, and as well inherit the Black Wing sword crest. When Itchface demands that Coinzel show him the art of the Black Wing, Coinzel doesn't answer, so they continue their fight. While fighting, Itchface realizes that Coinzel's skill is great, and his skill even surpasses Master Glia's. This is the most intense duel he's fought, but he decides that he will triumph. While fighting, Coinzel realizes his body can't withstand all the stress. Itchface notices that Coinzel is struggling with all his moves and wonders if he mastered the moves in another body. Suddenly, Itchface rushes at Coinzel to end the fight, and he manages to break Coinzel's armor with his own technique. After doing that, Itchface recalls that the Black Wing, which Coinzel has mastered, is the ultimate perfection of the forms of swordplay. Because of this, he wonders how he's able to injure Coinzel, but he decides to defeat him regardless. Coinzel gets back up and is impressed that Glee has uncovered remarkable talent within this child. Suddenly, the moonlight pours on Coinzel's body, and Rosen realizes there's trouble. As Itchface rushes to cut Coinzel, he's suddenly pushed back by a whirlwind of black wings. Coinzel rushes out of the wind with lightning speed and cuts down the young swordsman, along with his sword. As Rosen rushes to help Itchface, Coinzel admits that he can't beat Itchface without the Black Wing because his present body isn't built for it. Apart from that, he points out that there's hesitation in Itchface's blade, and being able to overcome this hesitation is the secret to him mastering the Black Wing. The building soon begins to collapse, but Coinzel jumps on the dragon Ott is on. Meanwhile, Itchface realizes that the Black Wing move that Coinzel used can eliminate an enemy in one strike. He begins to cry when he realizes that Coinzel actually spared his life. While flying away, Coinzel also realizes he needs to keep working on his skills up till when he faces Itchface again. He's never been this frustrated with his frail body, and he realizes this body is holding him back. The next day, the Order of the Seven Spears confines Elsaria and her men in the Lord's Manor. Elsaria is interrogated as to why she sided with the city, which had been condemned for siding with the hero killer. She protests that that's not what happened, but her superiors don't hear any of it and threaten to punish her and execute her men if she doesn't take correction. Annoyed, Elsaria lashes out in the room. Soon after, her knights help her to escape through the window. When her superior corners her and tells her to stop playing the hero, she tells him to shut his pie hole and lands a punch in his face. The knight tells her that her father will pay for this, but she believes her father will be proud of her for punching a man who told her to abandon the people. They escape, but they also realize they're toast. Later that night, a strange monster appears in the sewers. Meanwhile, the commander of the Battery Graves foot soldier is locked up in a cell. Suddenly, the ground of his cell is broken by a field marshal of the Battery Graves army who has come to save him. However, the field marshal gets stuck in the ground, and it's clear he spent more time eating hot dogs than doing military training. The commander is forced to help out his helper. When they get out, the commander learns that a noble of the Adamer Battery Grave the Mountains is raiding the Free City and has overtaken the rest of their army. The field marshal tells the commander that their forces have unleashed a terrible monster to vanquish the noble, but the commander worries that the monster will turn against them. Meanwhile, in the Free City, Algro and the men create a flag to honor Coinzel, but the captain of the vigilante group believes it's just going to cause trouble. When the admiral of the Battery Graves army sees the flag, he leads his men to bring down the flag, but the people tell him to piss off. Annoyed, the admiral orders his son to destroy the people with his hammer, but Coinzel soon slices the hammer in half. When the admiral tells his son to crush Coinzel, the poor guy plays dead when he realizes he's bested. Smart guy. The soldiers also run away, so the noble has no choice but to escape. Later, Algro proudly shows Coinzel the flag they made for him, but Coinzel cuts down the flag and leaves. Meanwhile, a strange sorcerer promises the commanders, the field marshal, and the soldiers of the Battery Grave he can help control the monster that will help them win. The commander is skeptical, and the sorcerer soon begins to speak gibberish. Soon after, Elsiria and her men ambush the building, but the field marshal is certain the monster will come to save them. Soon after, Elsiria's mage sets the sorcerer's work on fire and throws him in the water. Moments after, the officers notice the sorcerer running away. When they confront him, it turns out the esteemed sorcerer is the chief monk, Rasheb, and he mocks them because he has no control of the monster. Elsiria and her men chase Rasheb, but soon Rasheb is overtaken by a huge octopus monster. Surprised, Rasheb refuses to eliminate the giant octopus monster, but the monster, who speaks in Jirenpen's voice, angrily asks Rasheb who he's calling an octopus monster. Moments after, Jirenpen breaks through the ground into the city, with a back covered with octopus tentacles. Pipi hugs Jirenpen, and Elsiria watches in confusion just as we are. Later, Jirenpen tells them that the wall crumbled out of him, but these tentacles crawled out of Fargo's body and onto him. He considers this a chance to right the wrongs of Fargo, but he admits he's ashamed of his body. However, Pipi tells him it's really cool that he's making use of what he has, and that touches Jirenpen. Suddenly, Pipi tells Altea she'd like to go on a journey because she'd like to find something she can do to help Coinzel because he's always so sad. Although distraught, Altea asks her to be safe, and Jirenpen offers to join her on her journey. As if that's not enough, Elsiria's men suggest they join in on the journey, so Elsiria agrees. From that moment on, they lived happily ever after. Later that night, Coinzel flies away with Ott, but refuses to say when she suggests he does. He doesn't want to say goodbye because he knows he'd be forced to bring them with him.